Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Grace sat in the dim light of her living room, the television flickering to the current episode of The Bold and the Beautiful. The familiar theme tune faded, and the screen flashed to a sight that would alter all she knew about her life. Her fingers tightened around the remote, and her breath caught as the talk continued. Thomas, whom she had loved for years, stood in a shadowy corner of the Forrester estate. His face pallid and his hands quivering. The words poured from the screen like poison. Thomas had murdered Paris. Her heart dropped. Paris, the vivacious, ambitious designer who had entered their life with her daring ideas and charming grin, had vanished, murdered. And Thomas, her Thomas, bore responsibility. Grace's thoughts whirled, and the room spun as she attempted to digest the information. The spoilers she'd read online and the whispers on fan forums had not prepared her for this. It wasn't simply a narrative twist in a soap opera. It seemed personal, as if the show had invaded her life and ripped her apart. She turned down the TV, unable to endure the sound of the characters' gasps and accusations. Her apartment was peaceful except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Grace's mind raced. How could Thomas, with his quiet intensity and eyes that always appeared to hide a secret, have done something so unthinkable? She had always thought of him as damaged but redeemable, a man caught up in his family's drama yet capable of love and goodness. That image is now as shattered as glass. Grace arose, pacing her modest apartment. The wooden floor groaned beneath her bare feet, grounding her in the present moment even as her thoughts raced. She thought of Paris, beautiful, confident Paris, who had challenged the Forrester dynasty with her unique vision. Paris had been a breath of fresh air in the series, a figure who refused to succumb to the weight of lineage or precedent. Grace admired her and even envied her strength. And now she was gone, her life snuffed out by the man Grace had spent so many evenings defending to her friends. She stopped pacing and fell into the couch, burying her face in her hands. The weight of the discovery crushed against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. It wasn't only the storyline's shock value, it was also what it meant to her. Grace put so much of herself into The Bold and the Beautiful. The performance had been her escape, her solace during long, lonely nights. She had become immersed in the glamour, betrayals, and love stories that twisted and turned like a maze. Thomas had been her favorite, the one she supported despite his flaws. She saw herself in him, in his desire to be better, to overcome his past. Now that relationship felt like a betrayal. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from her buddy Mia, who was equally enamored with the show. "Have you seen it? Thomas murdered Paris. I am stressing out." Grace stared at the screen, her fingers hanging above the keyboard. She wanted to respond, to express her amazement and indignation, but the words would not come. Instead, she put down the phone and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The apartment felt too small and quiet. She needed to move, do anything to get rid of the heaviness that had descended over her. She grabbed her coat and put on her shoes before heading outside into the crisp evening air. The city hummed about her. Car horns, distant laughter, and the steady pulse of activity that was unconcerned with her distress. She strolled aimlessly, her mind a jumble of fiction and reality. Grace saw her reflection in the window of a neon-lit diner as she passed by. Her dark hair was mussed, and her eyes were crimson from tears she had not aware she had cried. She appeared to have recently lost something which she had. The show had served as an anchor, allowing her to make sense of her chaotic life. She had grown up in a small village where goals seemed unattainable and every day was a struggle to prove herself. Moving to the city had given her the opportunity to start again, but it had not been easy. The long hours at her job, the never-ending cycle of bills and deadlines, had left her feeling hollow. The Bold and the Beautiful had filled that void, transporting her to a world of passion and drama, where people struggled for their dreams and always found a way to persevere. Thomas had served as her mirror in that universe. He was the underdog who made mistakes yet persevered. Grace recognized her own failings in him. Failed relationships, squandered opportunities, and moments when she let fear hold her back. She believed in his redemption because she needed to believe in herself. However, with this single act, the program had taken that away from her. Thomas was not redeemable. He was a killer. She turned along a peaceful street, the city noise fading behind her. Her mind strayed back to the first time she saw the show as a teenager, cuddled up on her mother's couch. Her mother had scoffed at the exaggerated drama, but Grace was enthralled. The Forrester family, with their wealth and power, appeared impenetrable, but their lives were chaotic, filled with tragedy and betrayal. It made her feel less alone, knowing that even the most famous people struggled. Over time, the show had become a constant in her life, something she could count on when everything else seemed unclear.
But now, the constant had deceived her. Grace came to a halt, her breath catching and a sob rising in her throat. She leaned against a brick wall, the rough texture grounding her as she let the tears fall. It wasn't just about Thomas or Paris, but what they represented. Paris had represented hope and new beginnings. Thomas represented redemption, the belief that no one was beyond saving. Their stories had been intertwined with Grace's own, providing her with a way to make sense of her challenges. With Paris dead and Thomas identified as her murderer, that story was unraveling. She dried her eyes and straightened, pushing herself to continue going. The metropolis stretched out in front of her, vast and indifferent. She considered the other characters who would have to pick up the pieces after this bombshell. Thomas's sister, Steffi, would be devastated. Ridge, his father, would be caught between loving his son and being horrified by his acts. The Forrester family would shatter, as it usually does when secrets are revealed. Grace wondered how they would go, how the program would recover from such a catastrophic twist. As she walked, she began to have an unusual sensation of clarity. The show was not real, but her emotions were. The sorrow, betrayal, and loss were hers, rooted in her own life as much as the fiction she enjoyed. Perhaps that's why it stung so badly. Thomas's fall was more than just a story element. It was a reminder of how delicate hope is and how easily trust can be broken. Grace had trusted and believed in Thomas, just as she had trusted others in her life who had failed her. She remembered her ex, Daniel, who had promised her eternal love and then abandoned her without a word. She remembered her father, who abandoned her when she was a child, leaving her mother to raise her on her own. She recalled the several times she had put her trust in someone just to be disappointed. Thomas's treachery felt like an echo of those moments, a mirror reflecting her own pain. But as she returned to her apartment, Grace felt something shift within her. The show had taken something from her while simultaneously giving her something. It had provided her a way to experience, process, and confront the aspects of herself she had kept hidden. Perhaps Thomas's story was not over. Perhaps there was yet hope for redemption, not only for him, but also for her. She'd spent so long avoiding her own mistakes and worries, but perhaps it was time to confront them. When she arrived at her building, she stopped at the door and looked up at the sky. The stars were dim, obscured by the city lights, yet they were there. She took a big breath, the chilly air calming her. Inside, she removed her shoes and sank back onto the couch, taking up the remote. The TV remained muted, with the picture stuck on a close-up of Thomas's face, his eyes troubled. Grace glanced at him, looking for the man she had believed in. She unmuted the television and let the sound wash over her. The characters were still reeling, their voices filled with rage and anguish. Grace listened, allowing herself to absorb the weight of the situation. She had no idea what would happen next, whether Thomas would face justice, the Forrester family would mend, or she would find a way to reconcile with this unexpected turn of events. However, for the first time in a long time, she felt prepared to find out. The episode concluded, and the credits rolled. Grace turned off the television, and silence fell over her like a blanket. She picked up her phone and texted Mia, "I am still processing. Can you call me tomorrow?" She then rose up, stretched her arms above her head. The apartment didn't feel as little anymore. She strolled to the window and gazed out at the metropolis that spread endlessly before her. Life was happening somewhere out there. It was messy, confusing, and magnificent. Grace didn't know all the answers, but she did have this moment. And maybe it was enough. The afternoon sun set low above Los Angeles, its golden rays scattering across the Forrester estate in bits, as if light itself battled to find a way in. Grace Buckingham gripped the folder so firmly that the corners bent. Her pulse thudded in her ears, a constant hammer that drowned out the chirping of birds outside the window. She had not wanted to believe it. When the investigator contacted her, and whispers and hushed tones began to swirl in the background of the hospital where she worked, she closed her ears. Paris was her daughter, her laughter so clear in her imagination, her future so bright that it seems unattainable. However, the file she now held was heavier than her own body. It revealed the truth she had been avoiding. It provided the conclusion of Paris' narrative. The name on the last page, inked in thick, frigid letters, made her stomach turn. Thomas Forrester. Grace's legs buckled, but she forced herself to stand upright and remain calm, for falling apart would be admitting that this was real. And she wasn't prepared. Not yet. She strolled through the mansion halls with unusually loud steps. Memories of Paris flashed before her eyes. The smile she gave when she stepped into these rooms, the way she carried herself with pride and innocence, the way she spoke about Thomas with a sense of tentative hope. Grace had cautioned her and attempted to ground her, but Paris was young and optimistic about people. That faith had been crushed in the most definitive sense. When Thomas entered the room, his customary demeanor was clear. His hair was properly styled, his stance was upright, and his demeanor was neutral. But there was something underlying it, which Grace could see now that she was not blinded by hope or civility. His eyes flickered with shadows. "Grace," he replied carefully, as if he sensed the storm coming. "You seem upset. Is everything okay?" Her lips shook before the words reached her. "Don't you dare pretend you don't know." Thomas's grasp tightened on the back of a chair. "I don't understand what you mean." Grace slapped the folder onto the table, the papers splattering across the smooth surface like shards of glass. Photographs, statements, time frames, and evidentiary fragments form a catastrophic riddle. Every component pointed to him. Each page screamed what Grace could no longer ignore. "You killed her." Her voice cracked, but her gaze remained firm. "You kill my daughter." The resulting stillness was awful. It appeared that the house itself inhaled and refused to exhale. Thomas bowed his head, his jaw clenching and his throat moving as if words tried to escape, but became caught. Finally, he mumbled, "It wasn't supposed to happen." Grace's heart ached at the words. It wasn't supposed to happen, as if her daughter's life had been an accident, and Paris was merely a victim of his insanity. "She trusted you," Grace replied, her words sharpened by pain. "She believed in you. And you." Her breath caught, the pain too strong to hold back. "You took her away from me." Thomas stepped forward, his composure shattered. "Grace, you must believe me. I never meant it. She found out something I couldn't tell anyone else." "She wasn't supposed to." "I didn't." His voice trailed off, his hand trembling as he attempted to reach out to her. But Grace recoiled. The sight of his hand, the hand that had taken her daughter's life, made her nauseous. "You silenced her," Grace said angrily. "My darling, my tiny girl who always wanted to love and be loved. And you." Her tears obscured her vision, but her fury sliced straight through them. "You destroyed her because she discovered who you truly are." Thomas's mask broke. For a tiny moment, shame flooded over his features, genuine and raw, before his defenses returned. "I've lived with what I did every day," he said gently. "I see her whenever I close my eyes. I hear her voice. I know I will never be forgiven. But, Grace, you have to know that I cared about her. I didn't want to hurt her." The room whirled around Grace. His words cut deep into her chest. Had he cared? That word, poisoned by his brutality, desecrated Paris' memory. "You don't get to say her name," Grace retorted. You don't deserve to stand here in this house and talk about caring after what you done. You robbed my daughter's future, her laughter, the family she longed for, her job, her joy. You terminated it with your hands, Thomas. Her voice shook as she said his name, shaking with grief. She'd seen death before at work. She had consoled families and held the hands of the heartbroken. But she never anticipated she'd be standing here, face to face with her daughter's murderer, her wrath colliding with her grief in a conflict that left her hollow. Thomas fell onto the chair and buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, but the words were thin, sad, and meaningless. "I've lost everything too." "Everything," Grace repeated, her laugh sour and vicious. "No. You don't even understand what everything implies. Everything is watching your child grow, laughing, falling in love, waiting for her phone calls, and hearing her say, 'I love you, Mom.' Everything is knowing your baby is safe out there. And you snatched it from me. You took everything." Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her body shook as if it couldn't contain the tempest inside her. "Paris was my world," Grace explained, her voice breaking. "And, because of you, I won't see her again. Do you get that? I will never embrace her, hear her voice, or see her wedding or children. All because of your selfishness, your illness." Thomas lifted his face, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I wish I could undo it," he replied, choking up. "I wish I could take it back. I have prayed for it every night, but that doesn't affect what I did." "No," Grace said quietly. "It doesn't." The weight of finality pressed them together. For a brief period, the world outside appeared normal, cars passing on the street, the sun sinking lower, the day progressing into dusk. However, inside, time had stopped. A mother confronted the guy who had killed her kid, and nothing would ever be the same again. Grace picked up the papers from the table with shaky hands. Her rage had subsided, leaving only the awful anguish that permeated every aspect of her being. She turned toward the door, her voice soft but forceful. "You're going to have to live with it, Thomas. And one day, it will destroy you just as you did her. But it would never bring her back." As she went away, her body felt heavy, each step like wading through concrete. She wanted to fall, scream, and claw at the walls until her misery became evident to everyone. But she continued walking because Paris deserved her strength, even in death. Outside, the sky had turned dusk, with purple and scarlet lines over the horizon. Grace gazed up, her tears obscuring the colors. She whispered her daughter's name, as if Paris might hear her from wherever she was. The wind rustled lightly through the trees, and for a brief moment, Grace imagined Paris responding.